Hopefully everybody found a spot up there. Are your monitors working? You can see all the good stuff. So first of all, I thank them all when they're here, but I'd like all of us just give them a round of applause for coming today to be part of this. Again, I reminded them they are not the experts in the room, but they're here to just share their story, just like all of you had a chance here for about a half hour, 45 minutes, to just kind of connect with each other and share what's working, what you've learned, and modifications that you've made along the way. Jessica Gillespie, everybody, welcome her. I know Jessica, she used to work in ASIA with me, so. I told you, a lot of these people, we haven't even met until like 15 minutes ago out in the hallway, but we've had a chance to go to TIES conferences, and like anything, there's a network of technology people out there, and so I tapped on a few of their shoulders and said, hey, we're trying this. I know you guys are trying things along the same lines. Would you be willing to come and share your story with us? And so that's what they're here to do today, is just to share what's working for them. And I think hopefully they'll learn some things from us, but we're going to learn from them as well. This would be a great thing for us. I think we probably maybe need to do this more in education, is just to reach out to our neighbors not far down the road, just to learn about what they're doing in terms of, in this case, blended learning. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Now there is a URL you can see from the projectors here. If you have questions that you want to ask, but not actually have to raise your hand and say it out loud, there will be time for that. You can go to that URL and you can just put a question in there, and our digital learning team can kind of help you, and we'll monitor that. So when we get to the actual Q&A part of this, you can fire rapid questions at them and see how they hold up under pressure. Other than that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So we built some time in here just to kind of go around and just get a quick little introduction of who you are and a brief summary of kind of what you're doing in your classrooms. And then some of you are district folks as well, so you can maybe share your perspective of kind of what you're doing in your district collectively to kind of move blended learning forward. So I'm going to go ahead and just put up that next slide here. You had the questions ahead of time, so hopefully it's not a big surprise, but those are the three big things. Just your name, your school district, grade, job role, and then again, just a brief description. And who would like to start? Jessica, I'll pick you. Since you're right there, Jessica, you want to give us a start?
Can you use the mic?
You can. The mic, yeah, the mic. You just kind of probably have to talk somewhat louder because it might not pick you up. But
all right, cool.
Use your teacher voice.
I can do that. My name is Jessica Gillespie, and I'm a French teacher at Park Center Senior High in the Osseo Area School District. And I have been using blended learning for almost a year now. I joined the Blended Learning Collaborative in my district last year, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I've been using a playlist model to personalize learning for students, and I'm still doing it, so it's obviously working.
Thank you, Jessica. Tom. Okay. Yeah, we'll just go around the horn there.
Tom Brandt, and I also work in Osseo. I had the pleasure of working with Troy for many years when he was there. We still miss Troy. And so my role now is to be... we can pass that. Okay, that'll work a little better. All right. So my role now is as a digital learning specialist. So Jessica mentioned the collaborative, and so that's how she and I started working together. So I would support Jessica and other senior high teachers to blend, and it's very organic in our district, so we don't have models that we would tell teachers they need to do. In fact, Jessica and I started working, she said, I'm very frustrated, I need to do something different in 3 days. And we did. So we came up with this model in about 3 days, and she's been refining it ever since. So that's my role, is to go to frustrated teachers and figure out new ways of doing things.
Hello, I'm Charles Barniscus. I'm a 9th and 12th grade English teacher at Minnetonka High School. We went to a one-to-one iPad model in 2011, and I was a part of that. But then I've actually been teaching a speech hybrid course since 2011 and a composition for college hybrid course since 2015. And I work with 12th graders in the hybrid courses, even though the iPad model is now all the way down to our 7th grade. So the kids come in with their own iPad. I think that's it. Yeah.
I'm Gina Sperling. I teach at Meadowvale in Elk River, and I'm at the extreme other end. I'm kindergarten, and I am using station rotation, flipped classroom, and utilizing Seesaw a lot to enhance learning in the classroom and having a lot of fun. This year I've seen a lot of progress with the kids in such a really short amount of time since it's only November. Really happy to see where they're at. So.
I am Erin Renblum, and I am a first grade teacher at Prairie View Elementary and Middle School here in Elk River. And very similar to Gina, I'm doing a lot of station rotation, flipped classrooms, and then also sending home a lot of flipped lesson homework with my students, and bringing myself into their houses to give instruction at home and help support parents in a lot of ways. I use mostly Seesaw and Buncee to enhance my students' learning.
I'm Sarah Frater, and I teach second grade at Prairie View with Christine. And we do lots of really fun things. We do station rotation with Seesaw and Buncee, and we Skype with another classroom every day and read books. And yeah, it's awesome. My kids are all engaged and excited to be there.
All right, my name is Amanda Berg. I am a high school physical education teacher, actually, at Dassel Cokato High School. So I was lucky enough I got to work with the Beckermans for a lot of years, and that really got me started where I really teach the hybrid model, pretty much primarily, where my students will meet with me sometimes, but then there's a lot of flexibility in their schedule where they can use classroom models online. So I started out with Moodle a lot of years ago, and really got into that, but it's really helped with the transition to Google Classroom and now Schoology a lot. So.
Hi, I'm Allison Millay. I'm a 12th grade English teacher at Burnsville High School, and we just went one-to-one with our students last year. We have Chromebooks, touchscreen flip Chromebooks, and last year I signed up for our technology cohort just to try and figure out how I can utilize this new technology in my classroom. And I learned a lot. I really love it. I am entirely paperless. I haven't made copies yet this school year, which is pretty cool. And I also teach our 4th cohort of technology, and we have a session tomorrow, so got 2 days out.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Gorton. I'm the Instructional Technology Coordinator for Burnsville Egan Savage School District. So anything that goes in technology into the classroom, from kindergarten through, well, pre-K through like our special education, our programs up to 24. And with blended learning, when we, so like Allison said, last year we went one-to-one with our Chromebooks. We had a significant amount of change that happened last year. And we were trying to figure out how to have training, but not focus it on the technology, focus it on the changes in the pedagogy and the instruction. And so we actually partnered with Schoology, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of our model, but we partnered with Schoology to do this blended learning cohort, and had 2 that ran last year, and then the goal was to move it into a self-sustained model. And so Allison and Paul are 2 of our facilitators for our cohorts 3 and 4 are going on this year. So that's a little bit.
My name is Paul Connell from Burnsville High School. I teach 10th grade English as well as creative writing, and luckily these 2 went before me, so they pretty much said anything that I would say. I was in cohort 1 in Burnsville with Allison, and now we teach cohort 4, and my classes are completely run through Schoology. All of my materials are up there, using station rotation stuff, flipped model stuff, and anything I can do to give students access 24/7.
Hi, I'm Holly Skadsum. I'm the Digital Learning Coordinator for Bloomington Public Schools, so I work with teachers anywhere from early learning all the way up to adult. I also have a counterpart. She's not here with me today, but the 2 of us kind of run that programming. We were one-to-one with our middle school in 2014-15, and then following year one-to-one at our high school with Chromebooks, and then just last year one-to-one in grades 3 through 5 with Chromebooks, and a 3-to-1 ratio of iPads in K2 last year. We run a flexible learning cohort in our district. We're in year 3 of it. Our first year we had about 60 teachers, our second year 100, and this year we're up to 170 teachers across our district, getting what you guys, similar to what you're getting, so the support and the PD to really bring blended into their classrooms. I would say early on we focused a lot on the models, and now as we are moving into year 2 and 3, it's less about the models and more about what's going on in the classroom. And so that might be a hybrid of a bunch of models. It might be a mix of a couple. We talk less about the models now and more about how are we giving our students some control over time, place, path, and pace of their learning. So I'm happy to be here. I have probably a lot to share in all different grade levels. So feel free to ask me questions and see what I can do to share what we're doing.
Hi, I'm Steph McPhail. I teach 5th grade in Bloomington. I've also taught 3rd and 4th grade. And I have been in the Flex cohort since I started in Bloomington. And we are, my kids specifically have been one-to-one since I started there. And I have a lot of experience with flipped model and also station rotation. And we use all things Google because we love Google. So Google Classroom, Google Drive, we do a lot with Edpuzzle, and a lot of extensions and apps that we use with our Chromebooks too for kids to show their learning. And I think my big thing this year is I think it's really easy to put a Chromebook in front of a kid and let it be a personal experience, but my big goal this year is how can we keep making it collaborative between kids so it's not just a solo endeavor. So happy to be here.
My name is Mark Peterson. I teach at Benilde St. Margaret's School in St. Louis Park. This is my 3rd year there. Previous to that, I was at Dassel Cokato for 21 years. So the Beckermans and I go way back, and even farther back is Charlie Barniscus, who I had as a sophomore in biology at a long time ago. So I flipped my classroom back in 2012. I don't talk about that anymore. This is how my classroom runs, and this is just what happens. So I don't even talk about flipped model anymore. It's just that's how students gain content. I moved to that because in my high school classroom, it's really important that students are doing science, and so really there's a lot of activity in my classroom with regards to doing biology. That's primarily what I teach. And so we push content out of the classroom. That's how I deliver content with videos that I produce myself. We teach in a one-to-one school. We're MacBook Airs. And I'm always hoping to learn.
Wow, that's. I said I didn't really get a chance to talk to them ahead of time, so I laid awake a little bit last night, kind of wondering how the morning would go. I was like, do we have the right people here? We absolutely have the right people here. So thank you for sharing your stories, and you're right on target. I mean, this is kind of the direction we're moving in, and so thank you for sharing your stories. We're going to kind of transition here a little bit into the actual more formal Q&A side of ththings. And Holly, I just want to let you know you are sitting in the superintendent's chair. So if you want to increase your level of anxiety a little bit, if somebody wants to. He said he doesn't necessarily always want to be sitting up there sometimes. So it's kind of nice. He can sit back there and enjoy it a little bit. So that's good stuff. So we're going to kind of transition here to some of the more formal Q&A. And I don't expect all of you. We first of all, we don't have the time to have every single person answer the 6 questions that are up here. So I'm just going to open it up to the group. I'm going to take the first 3 questions, and then Paul Beckerman will take the last 3, and just kind of have an open conversation here with yourselves and try to respond the best you can. We have, I think, about 45 minutes set aside for this, so there's plenty of time. Don't feel rushed. If you want to expand on certain things or tools or resources you're using, certainly feel free to do that. So here we go. First question. What success stories have you had using blended learning? I know some of you kind of referenced that a little bit already, some things that you've done in your classroom. So who would like to start off sharing, like, when you first started doing this, or now that you've been into it for a long time, what do you see as some of the biggest benefits and successes in using your blended learning models? And who would like to start? I think I'll just use this here.
Okay. Okay, so I've been teaching for 5 years. This is my 5th year. And when I first started, I was like the champion of losing kids' homework. And like, just so messy. And I was teaching in 3 buildings, so I was driving all over the place, just losing everything in my mind in the process. And since we've been one-to-one, and I don't use paper anymore, I don't lose their homework. And they'll say, well, you lost what we were doing. I'm like, well, no, you just didn't turn it in because it's on Google. Duh. But it's really helped with student organization, and when they're gone, this is the biggest thing. When they're gone, they know what they missed. They know what they're coming back to in the classroom. And it's not like them coming up to me, what did I miss yesterday? And me scrambling because I'm trying to teach the current day while also going back to what I did yesterday and I don't remember. So just organization in general for everyone. Everyone's benefiting. It's very nice.
I am also a homework loser, so that was the #1 success. In the electives, I guess we would call them at the high school, I think relationships and the time that I get in the classroom now to just talk with my kids. We deal with the content, the fun, the handing it in, not handing it in. That's all dealt with online. When the kids are in front of me now, I'm talking to them, asking them how their day is, and then we can talk about what they're doing actually in the physical classroom. For me, it's the weight room or the gym, but that part has just been great. I can really focus on the kid instead of the checks and balances.
I think for me, it's been about student voice because like 1 year I had this kiddo, I think he goes to Parker now, but he was a selective mute and he would talk on Seesaw, which was incredible. And then I had this other little guy who was like a pretty big behavior problem, but he was really good at technology. So then he was empowered to be like a leader in the classroom. And then also just the creation. My kids can create. They have a voice. They can do those things. Whereas my own son can't do that because they just do like stacks of boring worksheets all day. So I just look at what we can do and we can offer so much more.
You want me to keep going on this question?
You're on a roll.
Okay. I would say there's so many success stories for me. The level of engagement that I see with my students during our daily 5 station time or even my daily 3 math time is unbelievable. And sometimes they're working independently, but sometimes they have an iPad together and they're sharing and they're creating. I think some of my best success stories come listening to them telling me things on Seesaw or reading things to me or sharing their excitement about their learning. And I think the relationship piece also is huge for me. I get to know them in a different way because I don't always have that time to sit and talk one-on-one with every student, even though I wish I could. But I get to hear things that I maybe wouldn't hear through Seesaw, and I have that knowledge and that understanding that I can connect with my students on a deeper level. Keep going.
Does anybody else want to?
Okay. I guess for me in kindergarten, it's the accountability of what kids are doing when I am working with a group of students. They are taking and recording what they're doing, so I'm making sure that I can check back in with them if they're making errors on their work, and let them know how they're doing, respond to them through Seesaw. Also, the multiple step directions is extremely hard for 5-year-olds, and so you've got some kids that can follow 1 step, but you need to give 4 or 5 to complete an activity where those kids are successful because they can go back and repeat and repeat and repeat until they can do it too. So I feel like all kids are able to accomplish a lot of activities that require multiple step directions because they've got the access to go back and listen to it again. And some kids have to listen to it 8 to 10 times before they're done, but they are successful just like the kids who can do it the first time that you give the directions. So I have really enjoyed that, to see the kids take ownership and accountability in their learning. So, Yep, I do a lot of Seesaw activities. I do a lot of recording directions for station rotation and using QR codes to scan the directions. I usually do station rotations that go 2 days. So if I've explained it the first day, the kids the next day have the opportunity to scan the directions again. I have like a flip station where whatever they're doing is recorded. Usually word work, I have them take a picture and record their learning. The other day I was able to find out some kids were doing sight words, but they were spelling them backwards. They were going right to left, and that's a huge thing for kindergarten directionality, so I could touch in with those students. So that was really kind of nice for me to check in to making sure that they're doing the task correctly. A lot of times kids are working in stations and you don't know if they're doing it correctly, and you just have to hope and pray that they're doing it the right way, but now you can find out for sure and make those corrections. So, yeah.
I taught my speech class traditionally for 4 years before I went to a hybrid model, and I thought the paradox was that as a hybrid course, I'd see the kids less because I don't see them every day. And what the the paradox is that I was kind of thinking about, I see kids, I have individual one-on-one conversations with kids, probably a total of 25 to 30 minutes over the course of a semester. In a traditional class, I never got that interaction. So in terms of what Amanda was saying about building relationships, that is definitely a key component of it. Even though I see them less, the quality of the interactions are better. And then also for me as an instructor with speech and composition, I'm able to help kids, like the learning curve is a lot steeper because I used to do like a practice speech and then a summative speech. And with rehearsals, which I do with speech, or with writing conferences I do with comp, I'm able to help students much more in an individualized manner. And I just see better writing and better speaking a lot faster than I used to in a traditional course model.
We have about a minute left.
Yep.
Tom, do you want to, Jessica?
When I first joined the Blended Learning Collaborative, my goal or my hope was that I was going to be able to reach all of my students because I wasn't doing that traditionally in what I was doing previously. And I'm finding now that I'm able to really help those higher level students, but more specifically those students who are at the bottom, who are always struggling. And I've seen success where the number of failing students in my class has gone down significantly. And it's because I'm able to take the time to work with them one-on-one, but also to build that relationship that I didn't have the time to do before.
Thank you. And if you feel like you maybe have questions, again, you can go to that URL there, but you're also going to get a chance to meet with these folks in smaller groups. So if you want to maybe probe a little deeper into some things, or I know not all of you had a chance, you'll get a chance maybe in some of those breakout sessions to share some of your stories. I think it's great to hear that you're using the technology to help build relationships, and it helps you to develop those relationships better. I think sometimes we hear that the technology sometimes becomes a barrier in those relationships. The kids are staring at their screen the whole time, and they're not listening or engaging, and I think you very clearly articulated that that is not the case. So let's go to question 2, Paul. We're going to flip the coin, right? So what are the challenges you faced? And the second part of it, how have you addressed, I think, how to sort of overcome some of those challenges, or maybe what you're currently working on? Maybe you haven't exactly solved it 100% of the way. And so would you like to start, Holly?
When we started our flexible learning cohort, we had only 60 teachers, and so something that happened was you might have a middle school teacher in math, and then a 5th grade teacher, and then a 3rd, and all of these people were trying to do the same things, but they were in different grade levels. And so something we tried to start doing, the challenge was there was not enough people thinking about one thing, and so we had pockets of people doing the same thing across the district. So we tried really hard to start noticing those pockets and pulling those people together. So one example is our 5th grade math cohort. We have 7 of our 10 elementary schools involved in that. But what we did is we pulled all those 5th grade teachers together, and then collectively they created self-paced math units. And so we now have our 5th grade math completely self-paced. Kids are working anywhere from 3rd grade standards up to 7th grade standards, and we're seeing really great results. And so I think a challenge that we found a solution for is start partnering, right? Find people that are willing to do what you're doing. If you're a team of 1 here today, try your best to get those other people on your team involved if you can, because working smarter, not harder, has been huge for us in Bloomington. We also just started this year a K2 cohort, so we have 50 K2 teachers that are all working together to create their content. If they're going to do stations, one school creates one station, another school creates the other, and they share those. And so I think a challenge you'll find is the time it takes to create the content in blended learning. It's a lot up front, but then once it's created and made, you can almost step back and have the time for the relationships and have the time for that one-on-one with kids, because you're not spending your whole prep getting ready for what's coming next. It's already made and done. So I would just say find someone who's willing to work with you and create that content with you, and that will help you out a lot.
I was thinking just some of the challenges that we've had over the past 4 years with doing this, and not so much maybe in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. Our kids obviously take their Chromebooks home because we are one-to-one. And so we've had to do a lot of modeling of how do you take care of a Chromebook at home? What's your expectations at home? And we are actually talking in the car on the way here today about just some of the work that we need to do with some of our families that are not used to having a device in the house, and how do we make sure that our communication is solid with all families in the district with expectations, with what we're expecting out of Chromebooks. They're not going home to play games. They're going home to do work at home. And so there's some issues we've had with that. We've had to do a lot of just like digital literacy around what is appropriate to use a Chromebook for. We do a lot of talk about bullying because we've had some cyberbullying that's come out as a result of using the Chromebooks and just kids with too much free time on their hands at home. But I think too, at your schools, make sure that you have a solid kind of flow chart of what to do with kids that are not following the expectations of their devices, especially when you get to a one-to-one model. And I know in my classroom, my big thing is 5th graders can be sneaky. Those of you that teach upper elementary, I mean, maybe even primary grades, but middle school and high school too, like they can be sneaky. And I think the biggest thing that's helped me in the classroom is if you are on a device, I need to be able to see your screen at all times. And that's been one of my biggest challenges in the classroom, is how to make sure that I know what people are working on when I'm over here and they're all doing something on their own. So it gives me a little bit of peace of mind to be able to see what they're working on too. So, yeah.
So challenges in a rural district like Dassel, Cokato, with the flipped classroom model, and I expect students to be watching videos outside of class. We had a number of homes that, number one, didn't have internet access, and so I would either burn DVDs of playlists of biology unit, whatever. So they've got 6 or 7 videos on there, or I'd send it home with a flash drive. So there's the access is a question. I dealt with it like that, I think pretty successfully. Other challenges, sometimes, believe it or not, students don't do their homework even when I assign it, right? I mean, I'm sure Charlie read every chapter of the biology book that I assigned back in the day. Probably not. And so if students come to class and kind of the way my classroom works is if I assign a screencast, usually they have a day or so lead to it. I use Google Forms that students will complete to ask some questions and summarize. And then I've kind of got to check, like, have you watched the screencast? In Moodle, I could go back and, like, have you visited my site in the past month? So a little big brother action. If students have not watched a screencast, then there's just the hounding. My screencasts tend to be less than 10 minutes of class time. So I will also probably just say, here's what you're doing right now. You got your earbuds, you're going to go sit in the hallway, and you're going to do it right now. And so it's important. That's how you're going to get your content for me. So those are some challenges, and that's how I've attempted to address them.
Anybody else? We found, get your hand up. No challenges in Osseo, is there?
None.
So yeah, there are no challenges in Osseo because unlike other districts, we have just one priority, and it's technology. No, we all know that in the bigger the district, the more priorities there are. In Osseo, equity is a huge, huge priority, as it should be. It's the #1 priority. So we, as a small blended learning team, there's only 3 of us for a district of Osseo size. We right away decided we're not going to compete. We're not going to try to say, don't pay attention to equity. Don't pay attention to these other priorities. Just pay attention to us. So we've made an intentional choice to integrate our work around the other priorities. So if you want to do equitable work, if you want to do equitable achievement, blending is a way to do it. It's an instructional strategy you can bring in to achieve what is your passion. Let's say it's equity. And so we found some good results, so we don't compete in the room. Our voice isn't to try to shout over the other people, but to say we can bring something to the table along with what you're having teachers think about.
Perfect. We're going to probably transition to the next question there. I think it's worth noting that you've all mentioned challenges, and we talked about growth mindset a little bit earlier with a few of you, and you certainly have modified and adjusted, and you really do have to strategize a little bit. Okay, this didn't work, here's a challenge, how are we going to overcome that? And so I think that is part of this blended learning experience, is there is trial and error along the way, and certainly the first time you start, you're going to maybe fail and take a look at, all right, how do we modify and adjust things to fix it? So, and Tom, I agree with your statement about the whole side of trying to integrate it. This isn't really a technology initiative, and I've talked about that a little bit. It's not a technology department trying to run this. We have our curriculum teams, our administration is here, our teachers are obviously involved in moving this forward because we want people to see this as an integrated effort, and part of our strategic plan to educate and inspire and empower our learners in all sorts of avenues of education. So here we go, question 3, and then I'm going to turn it over to Paul here. We've talked, and in our book discussions, there's been discussions online about classroom management. It's like, oh my gosh, kids are off task, I'm having to develop new routines for this, and it's maybe challenging in those terms. So how would you and how have you managed your classroom management in terms of moving this forward? And who would like to start? Your hand was up first, so
Okay. I'll pass it down that way. Classroom management is a really hard thing for kindergarten because they're coming from all different places and expectations, but the kids, when I say we're doing station rotation, I have kids say, yes, they're like excited, and my room is quiet. Karen's been in my room a couple different times, and the kids sometimes don't even notice when she walks in. She gets real close to them, and they kind of are like, oh, she's here, and because they're doing what they need to be doing. I have less chances where I need to get up from my table to walk over and redirect a student. They're engaged, but that's because they're also held accountable for what they're doing, and I don't think I have as many classroom management tools that I need to pull out of my box to keep the kids engaged and keep them learning now. So, who had their hand up next?
I did.
Should I?
Throw it over.
Don't throw it. Gotta make it to next Monday's board meeting.
So when I think about classroom management, I think about it really being very student-centered, and I try and put the ball in their court like almost 100% of the time. They have access to the materials. I've explained what to do, and that doesn't mean that if someone walks in the room that they're all 100% engaged because they're 10th graders. They're not all going to do it. But there aren't any excuses anymore. They're not waiting for me to give them some content. They're not waiting for me to pass out some worksheet or give them feedback on something, because it's all been done online and they have access to it. It also gives me a chance to check in with my struggling students almost every day when they're working, and they know that I'm going to be in their ear all the time. And so it allows me to be a lot more of a pusher than I've been in the past, to steal a line from Mean Girls, right? I'm a pusher. So they know that I'm going to be there, and that it's up to them to either do the work and step up and take control of their learning and their experience, or they're not going to step up and they're going to struggle, and they're going to have me in their ear.
Holly was talking a little bit about our math program and how it is it's mastery-based, set to the state standards. Some kids are working on, like you said, 3rd grade math. Some kids are working on 7th grade math. So the kids are all over the place in math. So you have 26 kids here and here and here and here. My gosh, how do you manage that? So one of the things that we do in math is we have the kids set a goal every day. And we use some of our whiteboard space. And so it serves as 2 purposes. One, I can look up at any time and I can see, okay, this person said they're going to work on these 2 things today. Check in with them. Are you doing that? Okay, good. And it helps the students, too, check in with each other, because it's kind of a little competition, like, oh, I'm on number 2 right now, and you said you're going to be working on this today. Where are you right now? But I've just found as a whole, it serves really well as a management strategy in the classroom.
This is just quick, and then I'll pass it to someone that's in the classroom. But I always ask my teachers in the Flex cohort, what did you do with your behavior kids before blended learning? Because they were still behaviors then. And so I think when you do blended learning, it only makes the behaviors better because kids are having more voice, choice, ownership. And so for me, classroom management is just not even, we don't even talk about it. Because I'm like, classroom management is there no matter how you teach. And so I think blended gives you the opportunity to have better classroom management.
I'll talk, because mine's a little bit different, but I think it'd be beneficial maybe if you teach in the high school English or in a college setting. If you teach a college in the high school, is I meet with my students 3 days a week only. And then the other 2 days are considered lab days or off days. So the students have a choice. They can take a lab I hold them Wednesday and Friday. So the students could either do their lab on Wednesday or they could do their lab on Friday. And then the other day, they're off. They can actually, Mr. Beckerman helped me with this, but they can actually go off campus then. And there's a lot more freedom with them. So meeting those 3 days a week, we can really, that's when I can really focus on their content. That fourth day, it really helps when they're doing the labs, but they could also ask me questions. And then that off day, that's kind of one of those things that they control it. If they need help, they need to come in those days.
For my class, especially now with the new Seesaw feature with activities, there's accountability. So they have to do the task that was given to them, and I can check in with them. Because before all this, we would do, like, I was first grade before, and we would do word work practice, and they would practice the word mom or their name or whatever, and there was no accountability. And so now it's like, I don't even need parent volunteers really, because the tasks that I have spent a million hours creating are super accountable, and they are matching our standards. And then at the end of their tasks, there's creativity. So like I said before, that is huge for me. So it's not just a worksheet. There's just, and so they're engaged.
Dispelled every myth I've ever heard about blended learning and technology in the classroom, so thank you for sharing. And I'd like to talk more, Amanda, about how you manage your hybrid classes. We did something like that a couple years ago, and I think there's interest in doing more of that in our system, giving kids some of that flexibility and personalizing that. I'm going to turn over to Paul. Here, you can catch. Just kidding.
You said not to throw it. All right, so we're gonna switch to another question, but I do want to remind folks out here watching, there is that URL up there, and if you do type that in, we'd like you to put in some questions, because when we're done having the panelists answer these general questions, then we will go to some of those that you have generated from the audience. So please feel free to do that. All right, the next question, and blended learning does utilize technology, but in what ways are you utilizing technology in your particular learning environment? Who would like to start? Mark?
So in our particular building, we use Google primarily. I love the collaborative aspect of Google. Typically, the way the model works in my classroom, students will submit their work. So I'll push materials out to them, so lab writing or whatever it happens to be. They'll Dropbox it to me. I'll use some feedback tools to give them some feedback. They'll make revisions, and basically I don't see paper at all. So I'm kind of like Allison, you know, I don't, as long as they put it in the right Dropbox, which is sometimes even for sophomores a challenge, to make sure you put it in the right spot. So that's kind of how the assessment feedback loop works for me. As far as the technology in my classroom, I do produce my own screencasts. Students also use technology to produce screencasts and podcasts that way. My students have, I don't know anything about Seesaw, but I'm going to find out about it. It's one of those things. It's like, you know, I've been using Flipgrid for a couple of years now. So I was an early adopter of that. I'm an early adopter of a lot of stuff. Paul and Pam will tell you that. There's a lot of technology I've left behind. But the technology is important. Relationships are even more important.
I'll just say really quick. When I started, I used Edpuzzle, and I've kind of gotten away from Edpuzzle, but it was a great, I mean, using it extensively, but it was a great way to get going. And I liked that I was able to see who had watched the videos and who hadn't. And so that was probably one of my kids' favorite ways of receiving instruction in the classroom was through Edpuzzle.
So one of the things that we've done over the more this year than last year, is really try to model with, we have like a leadership academy for our district leadership team, and model the things that we would like to see in the classroom. So our leadership academy this year is all run through Schoology. It's a hybrid, so there is some face-to-face, but there's also some online components. And it's interesting because some of the, the pushback is, well, what if people don't do it? And I was like, well, that's the exact same issue that teachers have with students. So let's have that conversation then, is how do we model these things? How do we enforce or, like set expectations? So that's been a really interesting process, because oftentimes our APs or our principals or our deans, our counselors actually have less technology knowledge than our teachers, but yet oftentimes they're going in and doing observations, they're doing evaluations and so forth. And so really putting them in a situation where they're both a learner in that new environment, and then they can bring that into their own situations where they're using it. One of the things that was really exciting this year was I brought up the idea of, okay, we want to offer voice and choice for our students, but how about our teachers using, voice and choice for their own professional learning? And I love what you guys have done in Elk River with taking that day and allowing you guys to have flexibility with that. And so we're not quite at that full model, but one of the things we did this year is offer at our high school and our alternative high school, offer options for teachers to make the decision what they wanted to do. And of our about 130 in that group, 100 chose the blended learning pathway, we're calling it. And so 100 of our teachers at the high school, in addition to our cohorts, are infusing it. And again, it's co-facilitated with our principal, and that point of having whatever the learning environment, not just the classroom, but having that systemic and district-wide has been really helpful in just increasing the conversations that we have across.
Okay, so my classroom is set up in a technological friendly way. It's our flex classrooms, flex learning classrooms. So I have 6 tables around the room, and then there's a monitor at every table, and I can plug my Chromebook in to that so it's projected. So there's not really a front of my room. Everything can be moved, everything's on wheels. The kids are scooting constantly, but it's okay because they're having fun. And I'll just give you a couple examples of how I use technology in my classroom. I teach an American literature course to my seniors, and right now we're doing critical lenses, studying analysis, and that, you would think, okay, you read a book, you write a thing. It's not very technological. But what I've been doing is I read them a culturally proficient version of Cinderella every day from different cultures, and then they practice a lens. And at first I was just having them write it on Google and Schoology and Google Talk now. It's the best. So they can connect their Google documents through Schoology, and I can watch them type on Schoology as they're going. But they'll instead of doing that, I did that first and I was like, this is kind of boring. Now I just use the discussion feature, and they write their analysis paragraphs on there, and then they have to give critiques to the peers in their class. So it's interactive and collaborative while they're practicing the analysis in a friendly way. They're not afraid of it. And then I also teach a journalism elective, which is 9, 10, 11, and 12th graders. It's kind of weird. But we have an online newspaper, and my goal is to always have it be entirely student-run. I don't really want to be in charge of it. I want them to be in charge of it. So I have assigned editors, and kids have to get their articles every week approved by their editors. Then they write it, send it into their editors, the editors edit it, and then they upload that to our school newspaper. And I just check the website every week to make sure everything's up there. And it's awesome. The kids are just collaborating, and I'm there to help them, but they also help each other more than I help them.
Wow, awesome. I'm also struggling right now between Google and Schoology a little bit, so I need to talk to you after. But I use discussions a lot also. The Schoology discussions are excellent because students can upload videos. I use a lot of video with in my field with in the weight room a lot, and then podcasts. I really like podcasts just because I feel more comfortable just talking and over when they can't see me, and I call them Berg's blurbs, and I just 3 minutes I talk about the chapter, give them a little bit of information, and it just almost like I'm talking to them. So use podcasts a lot, video a lot, and then heart rate monitors now. So if you see the FIAD teachers in your district, get them using those heart rate monitors. Those are awesome technology in FIAD.
So Christine and I are doing, and I'm sure her family wants to kill her for joining my team because I'm putting her to work, but we look at the curriculum map every week, and then we take our daily 5 skills and we make like a listen to reading that matches our curriculum map, and we make a word work that matches it, and we're making like all these things for our gifted kids and our strugglers. So every day they are differentiated, going through their station rotations with Bunsey and Seesaw.
So our school has been using Schoology for many years, and a lot of people have spoken to it being a very good platform. One one of the things I've had to kind of fight against is just that the kids are inundated with updates from all their teachers at the high school with homework and so on. And so with a hybrid course, if I need to get a hold of a kid ahead of time or just a quick question, I've started using the Remind app, which allows you to text kids and they text back, but there's a barrier so that you're not getting their number and they're not getting yours. But that has been really good because it's also in terms of building relationships. Like I had a kid earlier this fall who kind of left class in kind of an agitated state, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. So I just sent him something through Remind, and he just got back to me about what was going on, and it had nothing to do with the class. It was just a contextual thing. We were able, and that started the conversation. We finished the conversation the next day. So I use that to augment what I do originally with our Schoology and Google. And we also, on our school, we use Turnitin.com for plagiarism check, but also what I've found is it creates a digital portfolio for the kids, and I use it for just about every single writing assignment because they also have a voice feature, which allows me to give audio feedback, which is really good on those days when conferences might get cut a little bit short.
So I think we all have talked a lot about the apps and the technology features that we use, but I also, in my classroom, you'll see paper, there's manipulative, so I just want to make sure that you know whatever you're going to do in your classroom, that you don't always have to do technology. And some of my students are even hesitant to use some of the technology. They'll do the required things, but some of them prefer the paper. So just kind of keep that in mind that by providing choice for your students, having technology options, but also having some paper options is helpful for your students.
Tony, could you flip to the next slide for me, please? All right, great feedback. We've had a few people touch on this already with the differentiation piece of it, but let's kind of focus on that for a minute and talk about how has blended learning helped you in that differentiation of instruction. And who would like to begin on that?
So one of the things with the model or using playlists, before every student begins the unit, we have them set a goal for the unit. So on each assessment, they set a goal of what they hope to achieve. And students set it at whatever they feel comfortable with. But having that goal for each student kind of helps me know what their intended goal is, so that way I can help provide them feedback on their work to say, this is your goal, but I don't think you're quite there yet. And every day, trying to remind them to check in with their goal, so that way they can plan their learning for the day to be more successful. Also, too, with some of my struggling students, some of my students have had a hard time completing an activity, and Tom has helped me realize that completing an activity is not the same thing as learning from it. And so some of my students who they're working, but they just can never complete a task. I kind of set a time in my mind, you know, and I'll go around and I'll check in with them, and if it's been a certain amount of time, I'll just check whatever they have and tell them, you know what, you've completed enough to move ahead to the next thing. So that way they're still making progress and are able to have some success on the summative. They may not have the same success as a student who is doing everything and completing everything, but at least they're hopefully making progress towards meeting their goal.
Somebody else like
I think it has completely changed how I differentiate instruction, especially teaching first grade. There are very few things we can do 100% independently. And so by me flipping my classroom or me providing students with instruction on level, I'm able to meet the wide variety of levels that I have in my classroom. I had a student last year, and he really struggled with his handwriting to the point that it was illegible to him and to me and anyone else who tried to read what he was writing. It was very, very frustrating for him. And so I created some lessons for him on handwriting, which is never a very exciting thing, but he loved Minecraft. So the lessons I created on Buncee had to do with Minecraft, and when he finished a task, he got to watch a little Minecraft video, and he was completely engaged, and that's what he was working on when some of my other students were working on different things, but it was what he needed, and by the end of the year, he was able to read his writing, and so was I. And so I think really being able to see a student at where they're at and meeting that specific need, whether it's someone who's struggling or someone who just needs a little bit more.
I think for me, a big way that I differentiate is my expectation of when things are going to be completed. In the past, it was like, well, I think this should take about 2 days, and then we're all going to hand it in, and then I'm going to grade it. And that isn't what was best for all students. Some had IEPs or 504 plans. They were gone. They had things come up. So I have a lot more flexibility in when things get finished. And sometimes students finish things earlier, and guess what? The next thing is up there, and they can move on, and things take longer for students, and there's more flexibility for them to just turn it in through Schoology whenever they get it done, and they can show me that they understand the skill or they have the right handle on the concept, and it's not based on my arbitrary, notion of how long it should have taken. It's just how long it actually took them.
We have a team of 5th grade teachers, there's 4 of them, that are all in the flexible learning cohort and doing the self-paced learning in math. They start a unit, and it's like, let's say it's a 6-week unit. 3 weeks into the unit, they use all of their data they're collecting, and then they reshuffle kids into their 4 rooms. And so they take kids that are maybe right where they need to be and let them keep working in the room. They take kids that are completely done with the self-paced unit, get them into the 6th and 7th grade standards. They take kids that don't want to go into the 6th grade and 7th grade standards and just want to do projects, deep in their learning. They have a room of projects. And so what blended learning has allowed them to do, the content's all online. And so now they're thinking really specifically about what each specific student needs. They're using data to do that. And what they found was on the MAP test, or I don't know what you guys call it. Do you guys call it MAP? NWEA? Yep. Okay. So last spring they found not only did their low students grow, but some of their highest students were growing 40+ points because they were specifically met exactly where they were at. And so I think there's some really cool things that can happen when you get that content in line and you're using that data day to day to inform your instruction, and then with grouping as well. So if you have a team of 2 or 3 teachers, how can you expand that and start thinking bigger? More than just your classroom of 24 kids, how could you make that bigger?
So let's think about my classroom as there's 2 components to it. There are the science process skills, the NGSS, that's kind of where I go, and those are really the most important things that students are going to take from my classroom, because I know if I ask Charlie a question about mitosis, he's not going to remember anything. But hopefully students will take away the practices of science, like the tools that what scientists do. That's what happens in my classroom. Outside of my classroom is the content stuff. And then what students, unfortunately, by the time they're freshmen or sophomores, they're so used to playing the game of school, and I know we throw that out there all the time, but that's really what it is. They're so used to, like, I have conferences tomorrow. I do not have a grade in my grade book yet. I don't have a single grade in my grade book yet. And kids are freaking out. Now, I've given them gobs of feedback, because at the same time I flipped my classroom, I started doing standards-based grading in my classroom, which was insane by itself, but I put them together in order to differentiate instruction. So right now, students, if they're going to do some content, they're going to either watch a screencast, or I do give them a book to read if they're like, I can't look at your face again, Mr. Peterson, your jokes are stupid. Their grades are lower, by the way. With Power School Learning or Haiku or Unified Classroom, whatever the heck we're calling that platform today, I don't know. Students have access to multiple choice tests that are pretty low level on depth of knowledge kind of stuff, but it assesses content pretty easily. They can take the assessments multiple times because it comes from a pool that like randomizes the questions. So that's differentiated, so they can, again, use the assessment to fill in the gap, like, what don't I know yet, right? I mean, that's really what my assessments are for. What don't I know yet, so you can get better at it. Part of the Google form thing that students submit to me is also like, what questions do you have? So this past week, we're studying Newtonian physics in physical science. One of the questions one of the kids had was, well, okay, I teach at a Catholic school, but this could have been like, why did the Catholic Church buy into Aristotle's ideas? You know, that was a question he asked to me, using yet another mail merge, which is a Google spreadsheet add-on. I responded to him. I'm like, here's what I think. And so it was like, here's his individual question. Not all 26 of my students had that curiosity, but he did. And so, to answer those questions pointed to right back to him. Not that, some of those students in my classroom wouldn't be curious about that, but he was, and I was able to answer that question specifically.
So we have one more kind of preloaded question. And maybe on this one, we should just send the microphone down and everybody can share a nugget on this one, because it really is kind of an overarching question. And we have a lot of people who are just beginning the blended learning journey here. So the question is, what advice, tips would you give to those teachers who are just starting their journey toward blended learning? What's something you've learned, or a tip, or a nugget? And then once that's finished, we'll switch over to our audience questions.
I think you have started on a great journey by yourself. I was doing this pretty much by myself. I went to FlipCon 13, which was in Stillwater. That was an amazing. It was kind of like a TIES, ISTE kind of come to the mountain kind of experience. I also took my family to. This is kind of crazy if you think about it, really. I drove to Kelowna, British Columbia for CanFlip, which was kind of the same thing, simply because I'd met these people on Twitter, and I'm like, these seem like cool people to hang out with. So we drove 3,200 miles round trip. So bottom line, find people to work with, and it sounds like you're doing that now.
And I'm going to echo that sentiment. I didn't drive anywhere, though, so, to come to that conclusion. But anyway, no, find a partner. Find someone to collaborate with. This takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. Set one goal for yourself this year. Don't overwhelm yourself with trying to become an expert at everything. And allow yourself some peace of mind of knowing that you will run into hiccups along the way, and that's okay.
I'd say take a risk. So do something outside of your box, even if it feels scary and not right and uncomfortable. Take a risk, and if it flops, but you're going to learn from it and make it better as you go.
So many different things I could say here. I think sometimes just having conversations with other students about things that they're liking in other classrooms and thinking about that approach, and then going to that teacher and saying, hey, how can I do this? So kind of what they were saying, that you learn from others, but try going through the students sometimes, and whether it's a small group, just, hey, have you done anything interesting with technology in a different class? And then having that other teacher teach you how to use it.
I would say the first thing is think about like what is the benefit for students to putting, because it takes a lot of time to put something in place. So, what is the benefit in really having a clear understanding of why you're doing something? Taking bite-sized pieces, right? So it can get really overwhelming really quick, especially if you decide you're going to jump on Twitter and follow Twitter, and all of a sudden, and I think Twitter's like a fast-flowing river, right? You're not meant to drink it all. You're just meant to take like a dip into the pool every once in a while. And then the third one is the collaboration. And I see the Wordle getting bigger and bigger with like making sure that you have people that you're working with so that you can bounce ideas off, that you can share the load, you can reflect together.
One thing that's worked really well for me is just being honest with my colleagues. Like, I have an idea and I think it's weird, but do you think it's okay? And then I go to my students and I say, we're trying something new and I don't know if it's going to work, but you're going to try it. And if you hate it, you can tell me and I'll fix it and make it better. So and my students know that like if I do something that totally fails, it's not going to affect them because they're trying new things, I'm trying new things. It's all about being honest.
I think ask your students. Most of my technology over the last 5 years has been, how do I do this? Podcast, I asked students, how do I do this? They brought me to a website. Ask your kids. I don't think you need to know. It's not about knowing how to do the technology anymore. It's not. It's about giving it to the kids and what works best for them and letting them choose a little bit. So I'd say trust them, ask them what they want, ask them what they're doing.
So those of you who know me, I'm a people pleaser, and so I'm kind of the first one to jump in as well. And I think ignoring people when they say, well, that's not the way we've always done it kind of thing, that can be really hard, you know, because it hurts your feelings a little bit. Like, come on. But finding people and recruiting them to come work with you is really, really important. So principals, you watch out, because I work really hard.
I would say, and especially maybe primary or all of elementary, but take deep breaths. I show my students if something isn't working. In first grade, if like something I have planned doesn't work, the entire class is like, it's not working, it's not loading, I can't. The whole class is, and I'll just say like, we need to stop, we need to take a deep breath. And so knowing that like it doesn't work all the time, but when I wasn't using technology, things didn't always work the way I expected them to the first time either. And so having that grace with yourself to know like, it's okay if it doesn't work the first time, and knowing like, you can go back, you can fix it, you can say like, okay, we're gonna pause, I'm gonna try to figure this out, or we'll try this again tomorrow, and allowing yourself to know that it doesn't go perfect every time, but that's how you learn. And it's good to model to students, how do you overcome when something doesn't work when you expect it to work?
I definitely agree with that one, because there's lots of times that things freeze and it's not under your control. So sometimes have a backup plan just in case, like what's your thing to go to if something's not working so your class does not completely stop. And kids are fearless. They'll try anything. And so I just sometimes throw something out there, have them try it. Honor those small accomplishments that they do make with technology and share their learning. Ask them if you can share it with the class, because if you're sharing and they're collaborating, then the other kids get other ideas of how they can share their learning too. So a lot of times I take 5-10 minutes to share what they did during station rotation, you know, asking them, is it okay if we share with the whole class? And then the next day you have 3 or 4 more kids doing the same thing that other kids had come up with on their own. So share their learning with each other.
I would say probably be ready to be a bit overwhelmed by how much you're going to learn about your students, because I have learned more about my students than I did in a traditional classroom model, and that can be overwhelming because you got to do something with that when you learn all these different things about where students are at and so on. And just know that that is okay, and it's you'll find an equilibrium. It's going to be a little bit rocky, as people have talked about, when you get to that place, but if ultimately our goal is to help kids learn better, I mean, if you know them better and as learners and as people, that's a pretty good place to end. So you're being kind of courageous in taking this first step.
These are all really great pieces of advice. I've been writing them all down on my notes up here. So demystify it. Really what we tell teachers, this is an instructional strategy. Teachers know lots of instructional strategies. These are new ones, and you may use them or you may not use them. So it's not like this big thing you're supposed to dive into. In fact, it's really jargony, so try to get away from the jargon. Like now I know that it used to be differentiation, then it was personalization. Well, now I just learned this week that it's no longer personalization, it's empowered learning. Well, you know, next week it's going to be called something new. I know, you're on the cutting edge. So you got to stay away from that. We try to have teachers integrate this into their professional growth. So we have the AT PPS stipend, and so we helped our collaborative teachers take the language from our collaborative work and then plug it right into their professional growth plan. They were very excited because that's always an onerous thing to do. Yep, Q-Comp thing. And then we also help them through a self-assessment. If you come to our session, we'll show you that document. So they self-assess themselves. They find a mindset that aligns with blending that's really powerful, and that we say, this is the thing that's going to keep you when you're overwhelmed. This is the thing you can return to. This is why. This is your why. And then they look at attributes, and many of the attributes come from the other initiatives, like standard-based grading or equity work. And then they find an attribute that they think is important but is not present in their instruction right now. And that's kind of where we say, let's start here. You think it's important, but you're not doing it. And so it's that small little bite-sized piece that they can begin with. So that's kind of what we're doing.
All right, so to add to everybody else's, I would say there's definitely going to be failure, but Tom kind of helped me see past the failure and focus on the things that did work, and then you're able to improve. Like what I use now, it looks somewhat similar, but there's a lot of changes that have happened. And it was also input from my students that I sought out and gave surveys to and asked them how things were going. And the students see that change and that you're listening to them. And so then they kind of buy into what you're doing a little bit more. But focus on the positive.
Great, thank you. I've been to the TIES conference. I think I've been every year for like the last 12 to 15 years. And I think what just happened here was way more powerful than many of the, don't take it wrong, I've been to the Bloomington session. That's why we're probably here today. We went to the Bloomington session at TIES, and we got this idea to do this. But I think what we just heard from our panel members here is very powerful. And what I'd like you to do, we're going to just interrupt our schedule a little bit, and I'm going to invite everybody in the audience, as well as our panel members, just in a couple of minutes here, I want you to just stand up, just so we can get the blood. We've been sitting for a little while. And just share with somebody at your table what is sort of a theme that you heard, or maybe something that really resonated with you in the last hour of conversation. So just take 2 minutes and stretch a little bit and have that sort of share out.
I like it. On my elbow stand, so I can record my writing. And so I was thinking today, like,
We've got a lot of success with this. It works really well. It's like,
I can't stop it. She can have help outside of school. But I totally agree. It's nice. I think of like the fourth grade last year.
I'll say a little thing here.
What's in it? If you don't have a clear mission,
our high school, speak for everybody, are still stuck in like
From that, like they're
the 57. So when I started teaching, it was me, right? I had a book, I had an overhead, and a chalkboard. That's what it was. And now they've got so much more. So content is ubiquitous. And you need to get past that and figure out, and I do that. That's really, this is really leverage that in the classroom. Way more size in the classroom ever. Which is really what they need to do.
Yeah, biology is something we're
kind of makes me think of somebody said something they were worried about putting too much on because
no, when you were talking about how you got I was like, I think they say
I started my life and so it was like so much about it. They watched your
We started with we had like classroom sets.
You read the question. Okay, because we weren't talking to anybody, like, just going to read the question. And then, like,
maybe at the top. You might have a game system so they can throw a DVD and watch it.
Okay, everybody, we're going to have you settle back into your chairs. we will get started with round 2 of Q&A. So this, for the next 20 minutes or so, we are modifying and adjusting as we go. It's great conversations. This is an opportunity just maybe for the audience to clarify a few things. And so many of the audience members digitally went in and posed some questions. So Pam is going to read some of those questions. Pam's the reader, Tony's the scroller. He's going to kind of highlight some of the big ones that have come up here. And then we'll just, hey, if you think you can nail that question that's up there, just raise your hand and we'll hand the mic around. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Pam.
Sounds good. So our first question is, how do you garner buy-in with colleagues who don't see the benefit or are reluctant to changes so you don't feel like you are at it alone?
I got that one. I think that we can really celebrate that our district has, like, our superintendent came here today, Jana's here. That's amazing. Like, I don't think you in our district have to worry about so much anymore. When I first started, maybe so, but I think they have done, you guys have done all that work for us. You're amazing, amazing.
If I have a colleague that is reluctant, I like to sit down with them and just say, hey, what are you trying this week? Like, what are you teaching? And then I'll help them try and come up with a blended learning lesson for them to try, and then just revisiting them. How did it go? Are you okay? And just like easing them into it in a really friendly way. It's like I'm taking them to a blended learning spa and just, it's a comfortable place.
I like what Tom said earlier about the kind of that identifying kind of individual values and the attributes that you want to go with, and that holistic approach is that this isn't about a technology initiative. This isn't about, it's really, this is about, we know that some students have struggle, right? So how do we find additional methods that they would be more successful? And so if you bring it kind of as that all-encompassing kind of conversation, and you start to see more movement and more movement. And I know that, like the conversations that Allison and Paul have, with their colleagues in their, we call them our PLCs, CTs, collaborative teams, or at a building level or a building meeting or something like that. It's just those little conversations of like, hey, this is working for me. And then somebody sees that and they say, oh, I can try that too, right? So everybody has a different comfort level, but I think that holistic approach is really important.
I would say for principals out there, get your staff sharing with each other. So if you can cover a prep so one of your teachers can go watch something in action, do that, because they're going to learn more from going to see something than just hearing about it. Like, we could sit here and tell you guys all day long how great blended learning is, but sometimes you have to see something and be inspired by something to really feel like you want to do it. So principals, I would say, get that sharing going, get that collaborating going, take a staff meeting and have some of your people who are willing to share what they're doing in their classrooms, and then provide the time for teachers to go see it.
That's a hard question, because you feel very strongly about what you're doing in your classroom, and so I came into a building at Benilde St. Margaret's with lots of, here's how my classroom works, and damn it, the rest of you better work like me because it's the best for everybody. And it kind of came in like, should I go in guns blazing? Because I'm an experienced educator, I've been around a long time, but you can't do that. And so I've like, if there's an inkling, because I really feel like, and we've all experienced this, or some of us have, some of you were like too young to experience this, the top down, here's what you're going to do, and then there's no buy-in, right? So if someone asks me a question, let's go. I need to have that organic buy-in, and I've had really good conversations with people about that, or like, invite people into my classroom to see how it works, because some people just like, good is pretty good, but it's the enemy of great, isn't it? Yeah, and I hear that a lot, or that's in my brain a lot sometimes.
All right. Have you solicited feedback from your students on whether your methods are effective and/or appreciated?
When I was first starting out, I surveyed my students frequently, used a Google form, and had, kind of like a rating thing, but also left it very open for students to be able to give me feedback. And I definitely, one of my colleagues who works in a different high school in the district, we would take the feedback that we received and make improvements to what we were doing in our classroom. So yeah, definitely feedback's good.
I feel like this is my time for confession here. I still use SurveyMonkey. I think I'm almost up to my 100 limit for assessments. I cannot get Google Forms down. I don't know, maybe if anybody else is struggling with this, but I've even learned it from Pam. So I still use, at the end of every single trimester for me, I always put a survey out there, and I get a lot of feedback. I've adjusted a lot of things. That's where we could really got the data that students like this day off, and they like the flexibility, and they like the online, and where we could keep it going. So I'd say, yeah, now especially with technology, we can just put a survey right on our website, on our Schoology, anything.
So I'm very honest with my students, and they are very honest with me. If they hate something, they will tell me. And I'll say, oh, okay. And then I'll try something else.
I had to, because I got my master's in learning design and technology, so part of that program was surveying my students and seeing how things were going, and that really helped me grow a lot. So I've done formal things. I've also definitely had informal conversations with students as well, where they just come to me and say, hey, I wish we could do X, Y, or Z differently, and just trying to have those conversations has really helped me as well.
I started out flipping my classroom back when I was a 5th grade teacher, and I was making content day by day. Like, I was barely keeping up with my kids. And one day we had to go back to a whole group lesson because I didn't have the content for the flip video made. And the moans and groans were just insane. And they were like, we can't never do whole group instruction again. And so that was very telling. And at that point, I brought my colleague next door in, and we started creating double time content so we could get it out there, because they could not eat it up fast enough.
Yeah, it's been really fun to hear my kids say, I actually like math now. And I've never had kids say that to me before, but they like the way that we use technology now. That's really empowering to hear as a teacher.
I was at a wedding a couple of months ago, and James, tall, 6'7" guy, so maybe Paul or Amanda will know what I'm talking about, was at this wedding. He's like, so this is a boy who's now a junior at Bemidji State, and he's like, the flip classroom thing, Mr. Peterson, I thought that was the dumbest thing ever. I really did. And he said he had a couple of beers, so it was fine. He was being honest with me, and I'm like, okay, so tell me more about it. So he's like, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever, but now I realized you were trying to make me responsible for my own learning. I'm like, right there. And he's like, thank you very much for that.
All right, the next question for elementary, although having taught middle school, I see this question applying to middle school and probably high school as well. Tell us how you prepared your students to be independent during those stations.
I guess it's for my husband, so I should answer it, right? I think for kids to be independent, in the kindergarten classroom, just consistently have those stations in the same place really helps. Like, my flipped area is always in the same location. Teaching them one thing kind of at a time, but for me also QR codes work amazing for those directions, rubrics, all those things. I have recorded myself reading the expectations of, you want to be a 3 or 4, this is what you need to do next to the station. It really just helps that they know the materials they need. So on my station rotation board, I usually have an icon that shows kind of what they'll need. So flipped, there's an iPad. For read to self, there's a book box. So I mean, they have that visual cue of what their materials they need for when they need to be independent, instead of saying, what do I need? I don't know I don't have what I need. That really helps to have those visuals for those kids. And the same location is really important for me anyways in the primary ages. So.
Justin, if you have a follow-up question at the dinner table.
We don't talk about school at home.
I agree with a lot of what Gina had said, and for me it's go slow first to go fast later, and really take the time in the beginning, just again like I did before I had the access to technology. I really taught the things I wanted them to do very well, and even though my brain is like at the end of the year last year, I know what they were able to do without any direction at all from me, knowing that I have to take the time in the beginning and be patient for them to be 100% independent eventually in the year. And sometimes it's hard because I know what they're capable of doing at the end of the year, but in the beginning, really just going slow to eventually go fast.
We still use the Daily 5 setup. Like, best practices are still best practices. So we set it up like that, and we just infuse it. So they learn how to work in a group and pause it when they need to pause it to answer the question. They learn how to, like, cooperatively sit with an iPad, and we practice. Like, I think Christine and I practiced for the whole first month. We didn't pull groups until October. But now I'm able to meet with every single kid every single day. Which is amazing. I pull 4 groups a day, which I've never been able to do before.
We do a lot of Ask 3 Then Me, so I don't continually have kids coming up to me asking, oh, this website doesn't work. We have, we call them tech rangers in the classroom, so we have 2 kids that are kind of the go-to tech people in the classroom in case students are having issues with their Chromebooks or things like that. But that has at least freed me up when I am instructing my groups. And then, like everyone else has said too, a ton of modeling.
Our next question, what do you need from your leader in order to be successful in this environment?
I am amazed when I heard there were principals here. That is so cool. That does not happen everywhere. So you guys are so lucky to have those people in this room supporting this. I already said it before, but being willing to give your staff time to share and collaborate. And then also being willing to let your staff take some risks. So some of the things you guys are going to be doing aren't traditional and aren't what people are doing around you. And so if a principal's coming to observe you, be kind principals. So maybe they're going to try something and risk something, and it might flop at first. So knowing that it might flop at first, but it is going to get better later, or that it will improve later. So I guess creating that environment where you're allowing your teachers to take those risks and encouraging them to do that.
I would say it's important that every building has some peer tech coaches. I do a lot of that very informally in our building, and once you get over that, the first thing we addressed was people who don't want to do it, but then we have people who do want to do things, but they don't know how to do things, and that's only going to come from peers who have done it and been through the fires, and how can we do this better? So I'm hoping to make that a more formal position in our future, but I think every building needs those people, formally or informally, the peers who can go in and help out.
I think one of the things I've asked when I work with principals and APs is, so we say like support your teachers in trying something new, right? So like this is it's not going to work the first time. It might not work the second or third time, right? But that conversation is really important. And I've just blatantly asked, like, what is your evidence that your teachers know that you support them in trying something new? And when you start to put it to that kind of, can you pinpoint the evidence of what they're saying, that they do really feel that support. Not that we're saying, oh, we support you in trying something new, and then come in an observation and say, like, well, your classroom was chaos, and this didn't work, and that didn't, like that doesn't get us to where we need to be. Have that really open conversation of like, I'm trying something new. This is the second time I'm trying it, right? I've made some modifications. This is where I'm really worried that we may or may not have as much success, but here's why. And again, going back to that, here's why I'm trying it, because I think that this is going to be X, Y, Z, you know, later on. So I think, you know, having those really blatant and open conversations and having principals and other instructional leaders that are willing to kind of hear that and to walk that journey, because it's a long journey.
I've been lucky in that I've had a lot of help from my leadership, but I will say that this kind of goes back to the last question too. Really talking, it's counterintuitive for people who aren't involved in blended learning or using technology that you do get to know your students better. And talking about those relationships, because as teachers, it's really easy to be not self-promoting about what we're doing, but I think it's important to talk about how you know your kids in the same way that other colleagues might in a traditional classroom, because that's what people think. I mean, they think, oh, you're going to use technology that creates a relationship gap between you and your students, when in fact what we've been talking about is it kind of reinforces it and does it even better in a different way. It's not that there isn't still face-to-face interactions and those things don't count, but I think that's a way to, I guess, get buy-in. Because I did have an assistant principal who was a little skeptical just because they were new to the building. And so I met with them and just kind of went through like what this is what we do and this is what I'm doing in the class. And it wasn't even like a direct like confrontation or anything like that. I just heard that maybe they were questioning it. So again, being a little more self-promoting and talking to them directly about their concerns, and again, speaking to the relationships you're going to build with your kids.
Kind of a systems question next. How do you grow the differentiated models of instruction from one grade level to the next? So if a learner has an experience in one grade level, they continued that empowered experience at the next grade level.
We may have no answers for this question. I
Yeah.
don't. Annie.
This is my question. So specifically, I heard Holly, right, talk about math and how some kids were working on this grade level math and some were working all the way to high school standards.
Yeah.
So what happens when they get to the next grade level and
I can answer
you know what I mean? Like how does that work? Like, how do you make that happen system-wise so kids can continue to grow?
So I don't know the larger answer to this, but I can tell you that since we do this at 5th grade, our kids go to middle school after 5th grade and they get tested into their classrooms based on their spring NWA score. So start doing it at 5th grade is actually an ideal time because they're going to get put into a classroom based on a test score anyway. I don't know what the answer is if you were to do this at 4th grade or 3rd grade, if the people ahead of you aren't doing things like this. I don't have the answer to that right now. Does anybody have that answer?
I think that's a direction that we're all striving. I think that's a direction we're all striving to get to. Yeah. And I think it just speaks to a lot of that collaborative piece, not only at your school or your grade level, but throughout the district. A lot of people aren't there yet.
I can just say at Osseo, we had that discussion in elementary, and the boundary is you're not going to accelerate. So there are limits to some of this. You know, a kid's not going to be allowed to go from 3rd grade math to 8th grade math. They can go deeper. So they're trying to put some boundaries around that acceleration idea, and it was just fine. I like it when there are boundaries, with thoughtful boundaries, and that's one of them that our district has arrived at in elementary.
All right, we're going to wrap up the Q&A time. I know we didn't get to maybe everybody's question, but because we have these little breakout sessions, that'll be an opportunity to follow up with the panel members if you maybe didn't get up on the big screen here. I'd like to take the panel members and bottle all this up and take this on the road. This is a very powerful conversation that we've had here today. Mark, at the beginning, I talked about putting this out on my YouTube channel, and it will be out there. We'll share that with all of you, so if you want to take this back and use it however you see fit in your district, you can certainly do that. And then he asked me, it's like, will there be some monetary value out of that, so you can get some money. I think this is great. If we could take this show on the road and go to other places around the state of Minnesota, or there's a national conference in probably somewhere warm next winter. We could go to INACOL or something like that and take a bus. We can drive the RV because Kevin Jost, our digital learning person, doesn't like to fly on airplanes. So again, thank you. Let's give them all a round of applause for their advice and feedback. You know, as a digital learning team, we talk about our goals and how we're trying to move our system forward with help from all of these people in the room here. And you hit on all of those things that we've talked about in terms of mindset and building relationships, It's just amazing the feedback that you've provided us. We have some, I think, some great takeaways today. And then this afternoon, you're going to have some time to sort of take some of the stuff that you've heard here today and sort of figure out how that can fit into your game plan. So we're going to sort of get ready for the rest of the morning here. Pam's going to take us through a little activity in terms of how to prepare for these individual breakout sessions. So Pam, I'll let you have at it.
So in a moment, we're going to have a break to transition to the small groups. And as part of that transition, as part of your break time, we're going to ask you to sign up for the session that you would like to participate in. If you look at the presentation, I think it's slide 18, you're going to see a screenshot. Then above it, there's a link to the actual Google Sheet where you can sign up for a round 1 and a round 2 session. So before break wraps up in about 15 minutes, so at 10:45, make sure you have signed up. And then on the next slide, there's a map showing where these locations are going to be, which is just right in this area. And then we're going to ask that you not necessarily come back here unless you're in station rotation 1 or 2, or 1 or 2 that are meeting here. We'll just ask that you go directly to whichever session you signed up for.
Should we just go through those locations?
Sure.
You want to show that map, Tony?
Yeah.
Run through that briefly.
So station rotation 1 is going to meet right in this area with Paul. Station rotation 2 is going to be in the back area with me. And then out in the lobby will be the hybrid. I forget who's going to be with the hybrid group. And then just right with Kevin. So Kevin will be out there in the commons area. Right across the room we have the Crow room. That's going to be with the playlist, and that's with Troy. And right next to that, kitty corner from here, is the Elk River room, which will be the flipped, which will be with Tony.
So I don't know. Hopefully the restrooms are working. This is an opportunity for you to use the restrooms out here to the right. There's been signs in there that they're not, but I think they are working. So we'll give you that time for a little break, stretch, take your technology with you to those breakout stations. Panel members, you can kind of do the same thing as well. We'll get you connected if you need your laptop plugged in.
So round 1 is 10:45.
The levy passes that happen today involves co-teaching and some sections of regular test. And also, it's a great, we'll see if the levy passes.
I know, everything's kind of on board.
It involves tech coach, professional instruction, co-taught, with match Mike.
Having Garner ideas.
I've had 3 years right now about music and tech stuff. Because I like early, it's nice to use it for a couple hours try anything new, keep going. See my friends. Yeah, so 30 minutes after school yesterday was something.
I know.
We have.
We gotta keep it fresh. Gotta keep it
Yeah, I love doing it. So we left
I took away some nuggets.
I asked for that.
Pam was
No idea. And then they come into your classroom and evaluate.
Paul's desk.
They have no idea. Like Danielle, what did she get pinged for? Yeah. When all of her kids are doing something different. They're learning directly on their live, but they're
so I'm actually open for greater coverage of the day. Not every day, but like more people that prep or
She told me that if someone else told me that.
something, there's supervision or something like that.
Hey, I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we are doing this.
Cool idea.
We're doing this week of the also the and our PE teachers are meeting the whole I would like something willing to like during the day. That we could do. Yeah, you should.
Hey, well done. Thank you. Very cool. Thanks, Joyce.
So it's like, okay, well, I need this, there's this, so I did so much fun out of water stuff. Well, yeah, not like, a lot of
Yeah, but I believe, well, no, I think we're extra.
What brought you? Like, I want a PDF, wants to do most of that, and if I want to use their just assign them a PDF.
So in actuality, you were
So I'm trying to figure out, so if you're like, how to like how to get them to, so they like to, like, they're be principals and it's where does that come like I went to a school this year that my district, but last I see like you're crazy. It's just an you're crazy. But my new school, like, she encourages like diaper training. She like encourages confidence, support, but I don't want to like it's weird. Yeah.
Thanks, you too.
You probably
is it one going in and one going out? No, I knew that they were different. Yeah.
My friends, so like all our teams sharing in a cabinet, I'll show it to you, and then Christine came on this. I like worked really hard to steal her because I'm like, we supplement with everything, and so if you weren't for like the district, you were stack the worksheets.
And I heard you say your own kid.
Oh my gosh, he's so smart. For test scores, you know why? All they do is practice. And he's smart. It does no creativity. Like he's just so smart. But I try not to just like realize I'm at the other end of my craziness. So Will told me that my husband goes this way. We're down, Sarah. We're down. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna do it. It's really hard though. Like,
I know, I'm gonna start mine. Mine home. Send it to Bloomington.
Right? You try. Take a lesson now.
Cool. Well, when we have some time later, I'd love to do it with your brain. About Bunsey, and then
I've got time on Twitter. I mean, not everything.
Well, nice to meet you. Can I get, what's your name? Sarah?
Sarah Prater. I know I was going to say how about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, I gotta go.
And me too. I gotta go.
I gotta find my computer. And the day after I wouldn't be able to take the afternoon off. Oh, I just come off in here. Oh, sorry. Board members.
Come
Oh, and then did you see your second year? So you got. Yep, so the second round. We have no way to gauge interest we're getting on that. So, if you're that.
Kim and Sam may be a little bit late. It's going over. I think I'll be done in time.
So, yeah, we just thought.
Look at Francesca finally got to.
I think this is got it, and then they can shut it if they got it. Okay, I see. I now have, I started with 8, and I now have 13. So nice. Yeah.
We're almost 2-1. Now we have some more night. Carrie just said today.
Yeah.
I think I have 2 more to be 2-1.
Yep, and that's, you know, and I use one for like, and I don't even need it anymore, but like kind of one is like my teacher iPad where it's logged into like my teacher Seesaw. So then and I can do it with my laptop too, but I have it at my station and I can see stuff that's popping up. And that's nice to have because then it's like, oh my goodness, like so-and-so, like just, what is that? And if you really need to intervene like in the moment, then I can just jump up from my table real quick or making sure that kids are, just doing stuff like that. I like having that one, but you could do it with your laptop too. It's just smaller, more convenient. When you have 6 kids at your table, it's nice to have that. Or it's really nice to have a little bit more, so you.
I am.
Oh, you are? Yeah. So if you guys have something that you want to show in this board?
I'm pulling some stuff up right now.
Okay. Do you have HDMI?
Yep.
And I can get I don't know what they're, maybe we can wait until they pass. I don't know what they want to see. I mean, I have, I can pull up like my phone here, I can pull up my Seesaw or my
And, it's totally free flowing.
Yeah.
It's just
Okay.
conversation. But if you do have something that's
Let's get even most creative advice for the two groups. Let's get as close in as we can. We'll just be kind of like a round table. So we have our panelists here, and it's kind of an open forum, Q&A kind of a thing, where we just have free-flowing conversations. And if anybody has something you want to project, you can plug into the HDMI up here, and I'm just going to kind of get out of the way and let the folks ask questions, have a conversation. Okay.
How long is your station rotation? Start and finish? For like each rotation or like for the whole duration? So I usually do, I have station rotation, I have 5 that I do. I usually do, they change, but right now they're teacher time, with the classroom, or doing something. So I will morph it into the 5 of it. Right now, ability for writing, so I need like that, right? There is point something, so that's actually so that is I do about 12 minutes. Well, actually, I sit down working going about 12 minutes, that's when they're what's that, 12 minutes for each stage, yeah, for each station rotation. So I'm about like 10 to 11, 15. So, I do, and I have a separate one I do for women every day. That is, they only do 1 station each day for wind time, which is completely different than my station rotation. So that one I go through and I just try to show up here. It changes my color, and then I make my groups based on, right now, I base them on what they need to get with me. So right now, actually I have them grouped by 1 or 2 kids that are really struggling with fine motor, so then I can help those 1 or 2 all kind of do the same task with fine motor, whether it's writing our letters and pencil grips and all that stuff, but I put 1 or 2 that like I need to almost physically hand over hand with them, so you don't have a whole group of kids that you were, where you're not turning around and helping every kid. Yep, so that one, and I think actually Paul made that one, right, Paul?
Yeah, I stole that from a teacher that I just recreated.
Yep, and then this one too was sent out through her, but this, I use Flippity to make groups. Super easy way to make groups if you don't need them based on skill level. And I don't need these based on skill level because they're binders that I have are actually binders that have tasks that are differentiated for them. So if they're working on certain sight words or things like that, that's their differentiation. And then the IXL is obviously your win group. That's just your group, or do you switch with other teachers? We don't switch with other teachers. This is just me. And right now, based on how I use my kids, is they're not based by ability right now because I am basing them on like 2 or 3 kids that need support. Yeah. Yep. So you don't. So you're with your own group. That's my struggle is. Yep. Because I tried. So your win is completely separate than your station. Yes. I'm trying to. Yes, it is. Intertwined it. That's probably where I struggle. Yes. And because my station rotation completely changes based on. Now it might go later into like reading levels, then the groups will be different because I'll have, you know, some A groups and then I'll pull it right now because I'm focusing on fine motor. The groups are more like a hodgepodge of abilities. I kind of start the year that way because then you've got leaders in each group for station rotation. And struggling, they struggle at every single station. So I usually start to that way. Can you share your
Absolutely. Yeah, just to see it. I know Pam did, but I really like how you have it set up so that you were crying and I was going to go to kindergarten. Yes. I struggle with this so much, so it's nice to be able to see somebody.
Yes, knowing that, and the pictures are huge for me, for them knowing.
I like that.
They know, and even if you wanted to go even as far as blowing up those icons and putting them where you want them to go. You know, I've done that. I have 3 ASD kids in my room this year, and they have those icons on a pad. And it's like, and they come in my room, but they go right to my board, they look where they go, and they are actually, they can do it because they've got that. They can find their name, and it almost helps the flow of that better too. I have this up on my board. The whole station time. So I got a question, sorry.
Before you ask the question, I did link the template one to the bottom of the agenda. I don't know if I have all of your examples on there, but there's some.
Where did you put it? At the bottom.
The bottom of the agenda for today.
Yeah, I can share that with you too. The one that I did here is like I think I tweaked the one that you had there too. And my wind stations, I just do 1 rotation a day. So I've got 4 different, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So like every 4 days they're doing Excel, every 4 days they're doing RAS, every 4 days they're working on their data binders, which has like their, like what letters they need to work on, what segments they need to work on. And that's pencil and paper. And I put a lot of things in the sleeves. That one I changed, but I can share this one with you.
And how long is your wind time?
Our wind time is a half, well, 20 minutes by the time you, yeah, about 20 minutes. So I only do 1 station because our wind time. And then kids leave to work intentionally, like on like a tier duty and our sped, and they're leaving for those reasons. And so they
Do you have anyone like that on help video?
no, it's just two. I have an assistant, and she's working one-on-one, like a one-on-one like tutoring thing with some really close students.
But not just.
No, she's supportive. And that's what I just choose to do, is to do the one-on-one with one of my students that doesn't know letters, sounds, numbers.
And then who teaches your CSAW stuff? Like, right, when you were out there talking, like, you do that? Like, for example, the open CSAW, they need to use a drawing to work an activity. Are you the one that does that, or does your media tech person?
I don't think our media tech does a lot of, I think, like more like app smashing than teaching the tools. To be honest, I just tell my kids, and I use the icons, you know, what they look like on there, and I just tell them what they have to do, and they just explore and try them, you know, just say, I mean, start as simple as take a picture of yourself, touch the drawing tool, try to write your name, and just let them try to do it. But the activities in CSAW now, you're able to put the icons in there, where you can put the colon, you know what I mean? Okay, so putting the icons wherever you can in what they need to do for directions, I think is huge for if you want them to do a task, like to, I do a lot of my QR codes that have the directions, and I walk them through the directions. You know, next touch the draw tool, next touch this.
Like, just remembered last year's meeting that allowed
Yes,
you.
yes.
Pulled up the drive and I found all of it, because I forgot about that.
Yes.
To utilize that.
Mhm.
Just we have so many resources, sometimes we forget to where they're at or how to come together. And
pull it all together, those, right?
So how long did it take you to teach for kindergarten? Or like the CSAW part, how long did it take them to?
Not too long. I did one whole day where I borrowed iPads from the other K teachers. They all had one-to-ones. Right now we don't have one-to-one, but I got all one-to-one. And that's what we did all whole group, is we all walked through and we all scanned the login code. Then we all sat down and then we touched the camera. Then we all took a selfie. And then they all had to like write their name. And then they all had to like find someone to find their journal. So we walked through it all together, step by step by step. And I would say at least half my kids got it after that first time. And then you've got those leaders in each station that can help. You're supposed to touch that next, you know, and sometimes it just ends up on an iPad where you're like, whose is this? It's not in a folder. It happens, you know, so. But I did one whole group, and then I just let them go. And just, they're fearless. They'll try it. They make mistakes. It's totally fine. Maybe give them assignments that, in retrospect, don't matter. I mean, don't give them an assessment for the first thing that you want them to do. Have them do something that's just take a picture of what you're doing. Like if you're working with magnetic letters, take a picture, and their foot will be in
Because I had one girl that did the same thing. She just really, and how she explained her activity.
Yes.
And I said, that's what that whole digital journaling is about. You have to talk your way
Yes.
through it and tell, you know, the viewer what you're learning.
Absolutely.
So I just think it's fun to kind of share.
24. And I think like a really easy tool is to start with a camera. Yeah, I like that. Take pictures and then add a draw tool, you know, to try and draw on the picture. Just take pictures of what they're doing. I haven't done a recording one yet, just because they've done really well at taking pictures. So I'm not adding me sitting there kind of doing it more for them. Yes. But again, you'll have perfect pictures. But I was going to say that. Me too. Let's see if I can find his.
So Gina, you're
Yes.
at kindergarten level,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And what level are you at?
High school.
High school.
Is there anybody here for high school? Do you want to split into two different groups? Kind of, because this is great learning for us, but you might have some.
Using different technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe you want to just go that way, down that.
Sure could.
Does that work?
Are you only high school or?
I'm middle school, but honestly, I get a lot from.
Either way, I just didn't want to
Either way?
have it.
Yeah.
I'm good. Okay. But if there's perspectives that you have from high school, it's going to be different. Chime in and hearing from first grade.
Can I ask Erin?
I have a first grader. She loves Seesaw.
So you know this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I know Seesaw really well.
Can I ask you a little bit how as a parent, what would you want to know about Seesaw?
Sure. I'll kind of present similar parents. I don't want to present to teachers. Obviously, first grade, some of them have had the background of Seesaw in kindergarten, and it kind of varies just depending on their teacher model. But and same, I can pull mine up, but same, I just created mine on Bunsey, and I'm working on a new rotation where I'm ready to add in like different stations for them. So we started, like I said, really slow, and now we're I'm ready to look at starting read to self, because as we all know, sometimes when you say we read to self, then they're actually just like laying on the bullet. And so, so mine looks like this, but I'm the same, like I'm probably at between 12 and 15 minutes at a station. And so, I just use puzzle pieces, and so their names are next to their groups, and then it shows like what they're doing. This one is huge. I have 3 before me. Last year I had 2 boys in my class that were just very technologically savvy, and so like I had them as like our tech team, and so they knew that they could go to them and they could answer any question. I haven't found any of my students quite yet who are those leaders for me, but this one's huge, and I'm still saying it sometimes. Like they'll come up to me, and then I just do that. They're gonna show them 3, and they're like, and they go ask someone else. But I think that's huge, so that they're not interrupting me. And I think the more I show them, like you're capable, like you can figure it out if you try. In first grade and kindergarten, still they're used to like someone just doing it for them a lot, and so I'm trying to teach them like problem solve, like try, like what can you do yourself. And then this is a huge one for me. So this says finish, and so I teach them, and obviously this is for us kids. This is epic. They love both of those. We have happiness journal that they also love, and so they know if they finish. Like if, let's say, they're at work on writing and they finish whatever they're writing, that they have the choice to do something else when they're finished. So they're engaged and they're busy. I mean, it really is unbelievable. Like once we get started, like probably 2 weeks ago, I finally was like sitting at my table with my group looking around and when I look, like they are doing stuff and they're busy. Like no one's laying, no one's looking around. Like they know what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah, and so before I just had teacher time, work, listen to reading, work on writing, and now I'm adding read to self and the Osmo. The Osmo was hard for me sometimes because some of my groups had 5 kids, and I have 2 Osmos, and having 3 kids at an Osmo is very difficult for some kids. Some kids, like, they can share really easily, but with the words, that game, it's technically like 2 kids playing against each other. So some of my groups would struggle if they had to try to split it with 3 kids.
So now I'm adding it. I've had a student add it to my class, but now most of my groups are 4, so that should work out a little bit better. I do what Gina said also. So I set my timer, meet with my groups for 12 to 15 minutes, and then I have a bell in the front of my room, so I ring the bell, or I have a student ring the bell, and then we all come back to the rug for like my co-group instruction. But while I'm waiting for everyone to come, I have Seesaw up, and we look through it like what people have done. And they're super excited to get to the rug because they have to be at the rug in order for me to show their item. So then it kind of eliminates like, oh, I'm gonna read like a couple more pages of Brad's Kids, or I'm gonna take a drink from my water bottle before I come to, like they want to get there so they can kind of see what other people have done. And then it is also that like accountability piece for me. So if they were supposed to be doing something at work where I would see it on Seesaw and I don't see something, then I check in with them, what were you doing, where is it? Sometimes it's just like, it's still loading, or, you know, right, whatever it is, but it's that accountability piece for me.
So for word work, for all your different stations, are they on Seesaw somehow?
Good question. So, so now with us in Prairie View, that's been interesting because like my room setup is different, and so I'm the same way. Like we have lockers in our room at Prairie View. I don't know if you've been in there, but so I have 30 lockers and I don't have 30 students. So I have a locker that is my word work locker, and I have a locker that's my listen to reading locker. And so I have these symbols, like I printed this and cut it out, and it's at the top. So they know if they're going to word work, they go to that locker, and there's 3 tasks that they have to do in the week at that locker. And the puzzle pieces are on there too. So some of the tasks are all the puzzle pieces, so everyone gets to do that one. Some of them are like just my blue group, who's my lowest group. It has their color puzzle piece, so they know that's the task that they need to do. So for sure, like my word work needs iPads, but sometimes they're sharing, like I have making words that I do with them, and so they share one iPad, they plug into that headphone splitter, and that was like a huge one that took me a while to teach, but now like we have it down. There's the thumbs up signal, so we don't go to the next slide until everyone's thumb is up. And like in the beginning, it was tough, but we would stop and say like, nope, are all of our friends ready? And then once everyone's, because they have headphones on, so they don't know how loud they are, and then they'll, I'm not done yet! And the whole class is trying to work. So like we have this thumbs up signal, and then they go to the next slide, and it's a recording of me being like, if you can spell night, you can spell light. Write light on your paper, and then they write it, and everyone gives a thumbs up, they move to the next slide. Yes, a splitter like that. So that's one of the word work tasks, and then there's other tasks. So they would all have iPads. My listen to reading, they have iPads, so I have this comprehension skill for the week. I have like created a Bunsey course, so they either listen to me reading it, or if they're a higher group, they read it themselves. And then I tell them, like, okay, now go on Seesaw and draw a picture of the author's purpose and explain to me what was the author's purpose of writing this story, author's purpose. Or go on Seesaw and tell me the main idea of this story and some details that support the main idea. And then, like, work on writing is still, like, not technology. I have, like, drawers with work on writing. What I do have is like a fake student that's work on writing. And so they can go on and see some of like my examples of like, oh, this is what a list would look like if I wanted to write a list, or this is what a card looks like. So they don't need an iPad, but they have to take a picture of their writing and put it on Seesaw. And that's that accountability piece, because last year I had a student who was obsessed with making cards for people, but like the cards would be like, hi, I love you, love, Aubrey. And then she'd write like 50 cards that said, hi, I love you, love, Aubrey. And I'm like, I'm so happy you're writing cards to people. We talked about like, what else could you write? What could you put in? And so then she would start writing more and take pictures of it and put it on there for me. And I have 9 iPads and 20 students right now. So we're not completely 2-to-1 yet. We're hoping that we get that last iPad, but that's how I'm using it.
I think what you said too, like the station rotation, done stations for a long time, but the biggest thing is, I think sometimes, especially do a station, come back for 5 to 7 minutes. Then you release them again, and they kind of like clean up what they're doing. They come back, like you said, they want to be there because they want to share their work. Or as simple as if they're doing listening, I have epic this week, or listening to fictions lesson. It's like, I know who will be listening, so I'm like, you know, also, what did you listen to us about tigers? What did you learn about tigers? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay, so they are accountable for like even like their listening task, or if they listen to a fiction story, it's like, who's the character in the story? It was a boy. Just to get that dialogue going, and then they go on. So sometimes my lesson, after each station I come back for 5 minutes, and it might be I'm teaching something, or it might be just they're sharing this the teaching.
And that's me, and I always teach in between. So I do, I start with like my comprehension lesson, and then we do a daily 5 station, then we come back and I do a phonics lesson, and then we go to a daily 5 station, and then we come back, and sometimes it's like a writing mini lesson, sometimes it's something to do with fluency. So I'm always teaching in between.
That's a great idea. It really keeps them focused.
How do we start? How do you suggest us starting if we're not there yet?
Starting just the whole station rotation.
And I've done daily 5, so I can easily integrate it. What's my first step? What's my first step?
So are you doing daily 5 right now?
Yes.
Okay.
The traditional.
Okay. And so and that's what I had done before. And so I would maybe pick like one of the areas where you're like, okay, I could, because in first grade, like there's a lot of resources that have been shared, like especially for work. So you wouldn't have to be like, oh my gosh, I have to create all these work activities. Like there's a lot of stuff that we put out there. So even if you said, like, okay, I'm gonna focus until, you know, second trimester, the end of second trimester, on just work. And so I would start, I did the same thing, like a lot of times when I'm teaching something brand new with the iPad, like we have a cart that we share for the whole school that I can check out, so we're one-to-one. And so when I want to teach something really well, I love it they each have an iPad. So I did, like my workstations, I did the whole group the first 4 times, and like I made them put their thumbs up before I would switch to the next slide. And I explained, like, if your thumb isn't up, I don't know if you're ready yet. And so like we practice it over, and I said sometimes it takes a friend a little bit longer to write, and I'm just gonna patiently wait for them. Everyone's thumbs are up. So we practiced that 4 times before I let them try themselves. And just like Sarah said, I didn't pull groups. So like your kids are probably used to working somewhat independently, but if you were gonna start work, you could even have the group you normally pull just doing the task independently and sit with that work group every time they do it the first time first, just to be there to support them before you ask them to do it by themselves.
I would say that my teacher time is something that is not. For my teacher time, every time, like still, when they hear me say you're a teacher, they need to grab a book, they need to go sit down, and they need to look at one of my picture books before I problem solve like the first like minute, and then I'll put those books away, and then we do whatever we're doing. And right now what I'm doing is stuff that they don't, it's not a lot of teacher, I give them directions, I support them, but the task I'm doing at my table, just to get the stations up and running, is not teacher directed. Do you know, like later on if I'm doing like guided reading, it's a lot of teacher direction. Right now I'm doing my easy writing because I want to be very intentional about kids starting at the top line and writing their numbers and letters the right way. But I start with that, but I first have them look at a book. And it's books that are special books that like are not in their book boxes. You know, they're fresh books, they're like the 9 books actually. And I tell the kids that when they need to look at them, they put them away in their tub, I put the tub on the table, and then I start their lesson, and then they kind of work independently for 3-4 minutes, and then I can look and see. I also keep my iPad next to me on log in my teacher's app, so I can see scrolling what's going on right now, and so then I will intervene them right away. Like, you know, kids are having trouble with certain things on Seesaw, or then I also put like QR codes by everything that gives them step-by-step directions.
And your QR codes are linked to your Seesaw. They're not linked to Bunsee.
No, mine are linked to I just record myself on Seesaw. So for example, like poetry was one of the things they had to do. And that was actually my first lesson was I recorded myself reading the poem, and then I talked about some different sight words, things like that, and then I give them directions. Your job now is to highlight the word we in the poem. You need to then draw a picture to go with the poem, put it into your poetry book. So then they go and they put it in their poetry book. So the flip part of it was when you read it to them and you give house instructions that they can listen to over and over again if they forgot those multiple steps to do. Another flip thing I've done is those CSAP to hear my directions. So I've done BuzzFeed, but I've done a lot just through CSAP to get started. And kids love scanning QR codes. They absolutely think they're geniuses. So I need and you're just okay, but they love it. So I've taken that and put a lot into QR codes because they love it.
And if you made those QR codes last year, they still work this year, even though
they do as long as you print them out. Okay. Because they are archived, you can't print them back because it was made in but make sure you have them printed out if you want to actually. So I just, yeah, put them. I just download them into separate files for you. So, yeah. But I would say definitely make your teacher to go not high stress, high teacher directed task and tell everything about troubleshooting too. Like you said, my iPad, I can't hear the volumes. And they talk like that too. You're like talking in a normal voice and lower because they're talking. Okay, now wait until I get over to you and throw your shout across the room. And it could be just like a knee design or just those simple things that they need help troubleshooting, but you can allow for yourself to do that the first month or two, then they've got it. You don't have I rarely get up from our table anymore. Where I think it's a little happy into the times the station, but then pulling them back together too gives you the opportunity if something's wrong at the station. Boys and girls, our friends at the station have a lot of trouble. Let's change. I forgot one step. You need to do this. And this is what I forgot to tell you that you needed to do that. So it gives me an opportunity to reteach anything that I forgot, because we do in those stations when things go wrong, we can tweak it. You know what, this isn't working, I want you to do this. So, but something happened at Epic where like, you click on it, you give them favorites, but for some reason, sometimes they disappear, and they go to the recent one. I don't know why it does that, but I had to tell my kids, if you can't find your books, you need to tap on the recent tab, and it was just something that, you could do when we were not together, which is nice. When did you start this? I started beginning of October. So I did a lot of just.
Well, we got 3 minutes. You're on. What, you want to just share a couple things about what you're doing in your classroom? We're
Sure.
gonna go ahead.
Share what's going on. So, I don't know. There's a lot more independence in the high school classroom,
yes.
obviously, but it is a lot of the same stuff that is. I think the point is that we're trying to get different mediums to the kids, and we're trying to get them to do different things. So, we're starting to read Lord of the Flies, and we do a lot of stuff with pre-reading, and what are we doing before we're going to give you this for any book at any level, and trying to give them different things. So sometimes it's watching a video of this is why the author wrote the book, or having them do discussions on participation guides. These are various topics that are going to come up in the book. How do you feel about those things? Since Lord of the Flies is about kids crash landing on an island, I actually have a cool survivor quiz that's like, hey, and so it's like you crash land on an island and a plane flies overhead. What do you do to try to get their attention? It tells them the best possible answer. So that's a lot of my station rotation is just trying to get them to do different things to prepare them for reading, to prepare them for different units. Especially trying to get different mediums where they're writing some, and reviewing some, sharing amongst themselves, and sometimes small group, large group. A lot of it is not that far out, but I'm just going to do the medium of Schoology where everything is posted. And with high schoolers, it's a lot more. I like station rotation because it's kind of like, what are you in the mood for? Like, I don't want to watch a student video. That's us. If it's like, I don't want to watch a video right now, it's like, all right, well, why don't you go into this discussion and then do the discussion post right now, and you can come back to that later. So the flexibility of them having the choice of kind of what they're in the mood for, it's like, oh, they'd rather do that at home and then do this part of the class. So that's a lot of the ways that I
Do you use Schoology to do
parents can have access to Schoology, and they can basically piggyback on the student's account, but they have their own login, but they can see all their student stuff. So they can see every single thing that I post. They can see every assignment. They can see what their students are supposed to be doing, and they can see all their grades as well.
But they can't, right? They can't see like in discussion posts. They can't see other kids' responses, and they can't respond.
Do you have a lot of high school parents that are connected to their child's Schoology account, or is it more for the student and that you don't have a lot of parents who are?
It's more for the students, but definitely it's very helpful for those parents who want to be in there, and the students who need their parents still in there and still helping them and helping them facilitate. 10th grade especially, it's kind of that point where it's like, we're going to kind of back off right now and let them take their, the control of their education. They're going to kind of sink or swim, but some are still want to be right in there. And so they can see what the kid's supposed to be doing. Like they say, miss an assignment. It's not just, you do this human nature video with the responses. Like, what is that all about? Instead of the kids having some excuse, like, no, it's actually right there. This is exactly what they need to do. There's no gray area about it.
And then how long have you been using Schoology?
This is my second year.
So only second year. How did you feel about having that out there for others to see? Like elementary, and that part of the comfort, the teachers are trying to get comfortable with using it with kids before they let parents see it.
Real quick is that you don't have to glue it. They can do anything they can read it.
Right, but it's yeah,
I think I was okay with it because before they had paper copies of everything, so they could always more or less see things, but now it's more direct. That it's not the student's lens of what they're supposed to be doing.
When I'm putting stuff on there, and there is like if you're posting updates and
in Schoology, and I can see that they've done assignments, but I can't see them. It's just like I see that here and it's this, and I can't see it. So I know it's
I know there are some things like because
the new assignment thing with Google, the teacher has to share that software with anyone with grades. Otherwise, the teacher gets like parents can make mistakes. It's just the way that school will put in. The teacher will we did test it. Parents could not see anybody else's. So Schoology was purchased first. And then Seesaw was named at and Seesaw kind of came to our conference and started the grassroots movement. And teachers in the primary grades requested that we purchase that for those grades. So we did. So that's kind of where it fit in. And then we are finding some places, especially when you're giving like private feedback, personalized feedback, it's a little more public than this is and third graders start to need a little more privacy for some of that stuff. So we felt that there were some reasons why it made sense to stick with that switching point. It's D2 for us right now.
No.
They market themselves all the way up. Yeah. All right, we need to rotate. So thank you, presenters. Thank you, panelists. Go on to the next station. And follow me. Jump over.
I think it's Seaside teachers.
We're going to merge your groups.
Okay.
We're going to have Paul go to a different one that has more secondary.
Okay.
And then we're going to have you and Aaron go join that table.
Okay.
Because there were only like 2 people in one of these.
Okay.
You a drummer?
I am.
My son was a big drummer.
Oh yeah?
Huge.
Here?
No, in Castle location. Yeah, loved it.
I'm dying to know if they showed up. I love the colors they chose. I know. Two colors.
Oh, we are?
Yes.
I paused it because I was like, I don't know. Oh, so we're all sitting over there? Yeah.
So we're
And we're gonna have everybody
Is everybody
sit
ready?
Yeah. That's fine.
Aaron, did you hear we're merging you?
Yes, I heard that. I paused to your thing.
Oh,
so
perfect.